Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Welcome back to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. Well, prior to COVID-19, unemployment levels in Ireland were at a record low. Now, in the wake of the pandemic, some commentators are predicting that Ireland will record an unemployment rate of 17% by the end of 2020. But a recent survey by the Manpower Group revealed that there might be some recruitment green shoots on the horizon in the coming months. John Galvin, the Managing Director of the Manpower Group Ireland, joins me now to tell us more about these findings and how the landscape of work may change. John, start by providing us with an insight into the Manpower Group.
Yes, no problem, Karl. So what Manpower Group is a global leader in innovative workforce solutions. We've over 3,000 offices in 80 countries around the world. We were founded in the States back in 1948, but we actually opened our first office in Grafton Street in 1974. So we're very fortunate to be able to leverage our global presence and knowledge with the local market expertise that we've developed throughout the 46-year history in Ireland. Currently, we've 70 permanent employees in Ireland, and we've got just over 1,000 temporary staff working on client sites across the country in a range of sectors from IT to food production, medical device manufacturing and financial services. So our business essentially addresses the complex workforce challenges that organisations face today, from temporary and permanent recruitment to talent management, outsourcing and talent development.
And John, what impact did COVID-19 have on manpower?
Well, like many sectors, the recruitment and the HR sector was also significantly impacted over the last few months. I guess ourselves as a business in Ireland, we've predominantly been impacted in the permanent hiring part of our business, where a lot of positions were either cancelled or put on hold as organisations factored in the impact to their businesses. However, we did see quite a number of organisations within the tech sector who were able to relatively seamlessly transition to remote working with minimal impact to their business continuity. So we were able to continue to support those organisations within that sector. And we also saw some sectors that continued to hire relatively positively over the last few months. The medical device sector is an example that we've got a number of clients that we support. So there was actually more hiring activity in the last few months in those spaces. The other thing that we were quite fortunate about is we've invested quite a lot in technology. So as a business ourselves, we were quite quickly able to move everybody working in a remote environment. So that in itself was able to ensure our own business continuity was impacted relatively minimally.
And with many businesses having transitioned to remote working during the pandemic, is your own opinion that trend is here to stay?
I think that what's happened over the last few months and the disruption that it's caused has certainly given both employers and employees a lot of food for thought. I think it's opened a lot of people's minds, and it's made people reconsider how employees reconsider how they want to work in the future. And I guess it's making employers rethink about how they need to restructure their company moving forward. It will also be interesting to see what part digitization and innovation has to play moving forward. But I definitely don't see things going back to where they were a year ago. I think as many people have referenced, this is like a one big remote working pilot scheme. And I think in the main, it's had quite a lot of pluses for both employees and employers, the actual virus aside.
And as a result of that, is it possible that the geographical boundaries regarding the recruitment of staff will disappear now?
Yes, I definitely think that will be the case. We have seen organisations over the last few years bringing in talent into the Irish marketplace, be that certainly skill sets that are in demand in Ireland and maybe the talent isn't available, or we also see it within certain sectors where there's a requirement for multilingual staff and bringing people in from Europe and beyond into Ireland. I think what's happened over the last few months, where people maybe in the past wanted their staff to be working in an office, now we've seen people be able to perform the roles, not all roles, but a significant number of roles comfortably from a remote environment. And therefore, there isn't a necessity to bring talent into the country. So I think it opens it up to a talent everywhere approach where you don't necessarily need somebody in your locality. You could be on a small island off the west coast, but as long as you have the technology to be able to perform your role, I think it certainly opens up those possibilities even more so than they were in the past.
Now, John, one of the reasons I asked you to join us on this morning's show was to discuss a recent survey that you completed about hiring trends in both Ireland and internationally for Q3 of this year. What were the key findings of this survey?
Sure. So Manpower Group Employment Outlook surveys conducted quarterly to effectively measure employers' intentions to increase or decrease the number of employees in their workforces during the next quarter. And it's been running globally for 55 years and locally in Ireland for 18 years. And every quarter we ask participants the same question, which is how do they anticipate their total employment to change in the 3 months, in this case to the end of September as compared to the current quarter. But additionally, in this instance, as a result of the exceptional times since COVID-19 outbreak, we also asked how much of an organisation's normal business activity has been halted or suspended, and also when do businesses expect their company to return to pre-COVID-19 hiring levels. So the key finding that we got from the survey is that Irish hiring confidence has dropped to its lowest levels in over 10 years. And the net employment outlook score of -9%. So I think Irish employers anticipate a struggling labour market in the July to September timeframe. And as I said, these are the weakest reported since Q1 2010. However, despite this sharp drop across 7 of the 8 sectors that we surveyed, over half of the employers expect hiring to return to pre-COVID-19 levels within the next 12 months.
And John, how did Ireland compare to its global counterparts in the survey?
Sure. Well, the survey, so globally we interviewed 35,000 employers across 43 countries. So it's quite a broad global survey. And I think what we found from the survey is that it closely mirrors how the virus itself has actually spread across the world, where we see countries in Asia being most optimistic, with Japan followed by India and China being most optimistic in terms of the employment growth. On the other side, we see many of the Southern and Central American economies having a more pessimistic view on hiring intentions, with Costa Rica, Colombia and Brazil. Obviously, Brazil is grabbing a lot of the headlines at the moment, becoming the new hotspot for COVID-19. But conversely, we've seen the US forecast to add to their employment in the quarter ahead. And then closer to home, the UK has forecasted to contract by about -12%, which is slightly more negative than our own view in Ireland. Overall, where we sit compared to the 43 countries surveyed, we're in 13th position of those countries from a negative impact.
And were there any sectors of the Irish economy that were particularly badly affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so of the 8 industry sectors that we analysed, the restaurant and hotel sector was by far the worst affected, with -46% net employment outlook for Q3, which is the weakest reported since we started surveying that sector back in 2003. However, with over half of the organisations indicating that they'll return to the pre-COVID-19 hiring levels within the next year, I think it's a positive sign, and it shows the true resilience of Irish businesses. I think, particularly for this sector, should be further supported by the government's decision to accelerate the reopening date of the hospitality sector to later on this month, June 29th, as part of that revised Phase 3 of the roadmap. The other ones that were also negatively impacted or anticipate to be negatively impacted in the months ahead is the finance and business services sector and the retail sector, both of which have shown their weakest forecast since 2009.
And in terms of the business size, did the survey results indicate how SMEs were impacted? And in comparison, were larger companies able to shelter themselves from the impact of the pandemic?
Yes, we did. So we did look at the size of the companies and the impact specifically on organisations. So we saw with smaller businesses, they definitely found the going particularly tough in the last 3 months, and with a significant majority of them indicating adverse business conditions when compared to the larger companies. I think organisations that tended to do better were those that if there was no specific need for their core service, that they had the agility to refocus their efforts on services and products that saw an increased demand. So, as examples, I guess we saw some of the distilleries that started producing some of the hand sanitization and some of the medical device companies that we work with, whilst there might have been demand for the likes of a ventilator, some of their other core products, maybe there wasn't as much as demand, but they were able to redeploy their staff into the areas where there was a specific demand for their products.
So, John, when does the Manpower Group expect recruitment to return to pre-COVID levels?
Overall, more than half of the employers that we surveyed expect to return to hiring levels in the next 12 months. There's only a small portion, 14%, indicated pessimistically that they don't believe that they'll get back to those hiring levels within the next year. And then there was a considerable portion that just didn't know. And I think that's understandable when you consider the amount of disruption that's happened over the last couple of months and the uncertainty that lies ahead. We see the government changing the restrictions every week or two, which is a positive from an economy perspective because they're reopening at a quicker pace than was initially forecasted. But I think with that ongoing changes, it does create a little bit of uncertainty to companies. But overall, the majority expect to be back at the pre-COVID levels within the next 12 months.
And on that basis, John, do you expect future placements to be of a temporary or an outplaced nature for the remainder of 2020?
Well, we certainly saw the recruitment within the permanent part of our business heavily impacted over the last number of months. I think organisations will certainly reconsider whether they need to bring in people on a permanent basis in the near future, depending on what their business needs and depending on what the impact the economy is having on those. I do see organisations reconsidering whether to bring people in on an initial temporary basis, and it might be more of we'll bring people in on a temporary basis as we see how things settle down, and once things settle down, then hopefully we'll be in a position to offer people permanent positions. That said, we do see an increase in permanent roles opening over the last month, particularly within some sectors such as the construction sector. That was obviously one of the sectors that was flagged quite early on to be part of phase one. And we saw companies and we worked with companies within the construction sector to continue to interview people and have people ready to start.
So, John, taking all that into consideration, what sectors are you most optimistic about?
Well, the most optimistic sector that we've surveyed for quarter three has been the pharmaceutical sector, which is the only one that's actually indicated to be positive growth in the coming months. The business services sector, in terms of returning to pre-COVID levels, is also quite optimistic. And as I mentioned, the construction sector as well has also indicated that they anticipate getting back to pre-COVID-19 levels.
Now, I've been watching the work of the Labour Market Advisory Council over recent months, and they've been reviewing the short-time working programme that is operating in Germany. This programme provides employers with greater flexibility with regard to being able to reduce the contracted hours of staff during times of economic downturn. What are your thoughts on this, John?
I think, over the last couple of months, considering the amount of disruption that's happened to organisations in Ireland and globally, that companies have been exploring various different means to ensure that they can engage employees and look after them when times are tough, but also to ensure that the business is still going to exist in 3 and 6 months' time, and ultimately to be able to offer long-term employment for individuals within their business. So I know we obviously have short time working in Ireland at the moment, and I think the temporary wage subsidy scheme that the government introduced has certainly helped significant number of companies throughout the country. As that temporary wage subsidy scheme ends, if it does end in August, I think companies are certainly right to reconsider absolutely every means to not only ensure the business survives, but to ensure that we have jobs to offer people, be they existing employees or employees that maybe are interested in working on shorter hours. And that might appeal to people as opposed to necessarily permanent employment.
And of course, John, better work-life balance is a term that we're all very familiar with, but the recently published programme for government makes a commitment to creating a better work-life balance. They're talking about introducing a right to disconnect in 2020, and they're also considering a role for the Workplace Relations Commission in drawing up a code in this particular area. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very interesting topic. I know a lot of organisations have been conducting surveys on their own employees over the past couple of months to determine, what impact this remote working has had on them. What are the positive outcomes? What are the negative outcomes? And one of the negatives that we've seen internally as an organisation ourselves is that people struggle to switch off. I think that's probably more intense over the past couple of months because they've had nothing else to do. They've had nowhere else to go. And the probably lure of just opening the laptop and having a look at emails is there. Whereas now as restrictions ease, it will enable people to, have more options to get out and about and switch off from work. So I think an initiative in itself is a good idea. We need to be able to promote people to switch off as much as they can outside of their core working hours. But I don't think it should go maybe to the extremes of putting specific times in place when an organisation can engage with employees, because now more than ever, employees want flexibility. And perhaps they might want to work early in the morning or late in the evening, and by putting those communication restrictions in place, that won't enable that level of engagement. Similarly, we need to think about how we're engaged at a global level. Lots of people within the Irish market engage with colleagues, clients, customers across the world. So we need to ensure, depending on what your role is, if it involves working late at night or early in the morning, that you still have the means to do that.
Finally this morning, with recent estimates predicting that Ireland might record an unemployment rate of 17% this year, how will that impact recruitment agencies like the Manpower Group?
I think, the survey that we've just referenced is quite relatively pessimistic. There's certainly glimmers of light over the coming months. And as I mentioned, with over 50% of companies indicating that they're going to get back to hiring levels early next year, I think it bodes well for the future, but I do see there being testing times ahead. And I think organisations like ourselves that might have 6 months ago been forecasting significant growth this year and next year, that is no longer the case. Whilst, most companies will certainly grow from a trough that they saw in the last number of months. It probably won't be to the extent that they saw it a year ago. And it's up to organisations like yourself and all organisations to reconsider what service and products that they're offering to the market.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was John Galvin, the Managing Director of Manpower Group Ireland. And I would like to thank John for sharing his industry insights with us this morning.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
South